You're listening to Cosmic Cousins Soul-Centered Astrology for grounding that ass from all the new age sass. I am your host, Jeff Hinshaw. Cosmic Cousins is a astrology podcast that is released on every new and full moon, and in this case, the first day of Libra season. And it's all to honor the interconnectedness of our universal family through embodied health, self-discovery, and deeper learning. Hello, Cosmic Cousins. Happy Libra season to you all. We're right here at this perfect, delicate balance between light and dark. Day and night are in equal measure. The scales of Libra. It's such a delicate time of year. It's a beautiful time of year. I mean, Libra is ruled by Venus, so we shift gears towards this more relational and artistic time. Libra is what I like to think of as the gatekeeper to the second half of the wheel. And we can even feel that in the tarot. The soul growth card for Libra is Justice. And if you know the major arcana of the tarot, you know Justice is right in the center of the major arcana. There's 22 major arcana cards, and Libra is right there in the center at number 11, and so is Libra. It's in the center of our wheel. So it's the gatekeeper to the second half of the wheel. That's how I like to think of it, and it's this initiator of the yin energy, the dark side of the wheel, the more passive, the feminine, the more receptive. Libra is this sacred balance point. So we get to recalibrate. We find ourselves interested in the other, interested in collaborations and partnerships, and in a very Libran sort of way, I've decided to initiate you all into this Cardinal Air season by teaming up with another astrologer and a friend of mine, Akenya Double Venus, who is here with us on the show today. So Akenya is not only an astrologer, but is also a multi-genre singer, pianist, and composer. Her music places a strong emphasis on jazz and incorporates elements of hip-hop, soul, pop, classical, and world music. She has performed globally and is preparing to release her full-length album, which is titled, are you ready for this? It's titled Moon in the Fourth. So in our conversation, we talk about all things Libra, and we dive deep into the major transits of Libra season 2020. So I'm excited to get into all of that with you today on this episode. But before we get into our conversation, I would like to make a few announcements. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Jeff Hinshaw. I am an astrologer, and a tarot reader, and I'm currently offering 2-hour deep dive readings. And there's just a few readings left available in October. And I have openings for November and December that are currently available. If you're looking to dive deep into either your birth chart or upcoming transits, I would be honored to connect with you in that way. And Libra season really is this great time to work one-on-one with another. And so during our time together, it's a dialogue. It's a conversation that we hold with each other. And also, Mercury is entering Scorpio in Libra season, right towards the beginning of Libra season, which we'll talk about today. But Mercury in Scorpio is a great time to dive deep into reflection and self-inquiry for emotional transformation. So if you're interested in doing any of that too, that is also quite resonant with the tarot. So if you're wanting to work with Mercury in Scorpio, I offer tarot readings, which you'll find a link in the show notes, or you can visit my website at cosmiccousins.com. In addition, if you'd like to support me and my offering, which is this podcast, Cosmic Cousins, you can become a Patreon for the show, where you can sign up to contribute a monthly donation. Every dollar given to me through Patreon helps continue to provide stability to this platform so that it is a free offering and service for you that is also an ad-free space, which I'm quite passionate about. So to all of the Patreon supporters, thank you so much. We do have some new Patreon supporters. Some of these supporters actually signed up in the last few months, but as those of you know, I've been transitioning into a new home, and so I'm just now getting to announce these names, so thank you for your patience. Our new Patreon supporters are 𝓃𝓉𝓘𝓐, Laura Looney, Jenna Barnes, David Rock, Emma Simpson, Samantha Brooks, May Boone, Noah Barnes, Kimmy, Ali Casanova, and Leave Love Good. Again, thank you, Patreon supporters. Your support means the world to me, and it encourages me to continue on with this podcast platform. So thank you. And finally, the last announcement I'd like to make is I'd like to share the most recent review of the podcast, and this one comes from Ninja Nun 911. This is what Ninja Nun writes. I love this podcast. Jeff's approach to astrology is inspiring, makes you think, makes you feel, and is very grounding at the same time. So thank you, Ninja Nun 911. If you haven't already and you feel called to, you can rate this podcast and leave a review. The more ratings that there are, the more likely this podcast is able to expand and grow in new ways. So I greatly appreciate it. And now that's all the announcements we have. And so without further ado, here's our Libra season 2020 conversation with Akenya Double Venus. Today with us on the show, I'm super excited to introduce you to Akenya Double Venus, who is not only a great friend, but also an incredible musician and gifted astrologer. Thank you so much for being on Cosmic Cousins with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So Double Venus, I think this is a cool place to start out. What inspired the name Double Venus for you?
Well, I literally am a double Venus person because my luminaries, my sun and moon, are in Libra and Taurus respectively. So, and for those who don't know, those are the two signs ruled by Venus in the zodiac. So it's funny, I actually was doing a poll on my Facebook, or not Facebook, maybe Facebook and Instagram, before I launched my Double Venus account to see if people had ideas for names. And I kind of set it off the cuff that like, oh, well, I'm a double Venus, blah, 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 blah. And a friend was like, you just said the name. double Venus. And I was like, oh, wow, yes.
There it is.
So there it is.
Well, I also love that too. That feels so Libra to me, this like polling of people, getting other people's opinions on what they think the name, which names I think of with air signs are really great at naming things. But then even, it wasn't just the poll, it was also your friend who was like, you just said it, Double Venus. And so there's like this mirroring of your close friends and relationships in that name too, which kind of, that's cool for me to learn about Double Venus because it deepens my connection to your Libra.
Yeah.
And here we are, it's Libra season, and that's why we're here today to gather. And that's why I asked you to collaborate with me in this way.
Yes.
So we know your sun and moon. What about what's your big three? What's your rising?
Capricorn.
Okay. So we got double earth air.
Yes. Although my chart is primarily water, actually. But yeah, it's like if you're just looking at my main placements, there's a lot about me you won't understand until you look deeper into the chart.
Underneath the surface, which feels very water-like.
Yes, for sure.
I'm curious, as we're talking about your big three, what is it like to have a Libra sun with a Taurus moon and having this double Venus placement? But is there anything that you have to say about the difference between Libra and Taurus as both being these signs ruled by Venus?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because in the zodiac, they quincunx each other, which is always an interesting thing to see because it infers that the signs don't have much in common. The modalities, the elements, the the energies, there's no common ground. But it's interesting when quincunx signs have the same ruler, which happens sometimes. I think the other one is Scorpio and Aries.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my chart, the way my sun and moon is set up, because of the degree of it, is my sun actually biquintiles my moon instead of quincunxing my moon, which is a very different dynamic. So the way I'm interacting with my sun and moon, I think is an interesting thing that maybe isn't a traditional relationship between Libra and Taurus. But I find that Taurus has obviously this more kind of earthy, security oriented quality to it, and seeking that security through more tangible means. There's a sensuality to that energy, and certainly also a stubbornness to that energy. And I feel like I can totally relate to that, being a Taurus moon. It can make change a difficult thing on a very fundamental level if it feels like it's something that's threatening
that fixed earth
security, right? And I have some interesting things going on with my moon that makes that a little bit more nuanced for me. But and then, I feel like Libra is kind of a more conceptual way of navigating Venus. It's more about fairness and diplomacy and balance, and the concept of justice, the concept of, things being harmonious and peaceful and beautiful. So I don't know if that makes sense, but just kind of that air quality of it being more of an ideology and a mindset, and how even Libras kind of are as communicators, leaning itself toward a more balanced and fair kind of energy, whereas I think Taurus is a little bit more physical realm oriented in terms of how it's seeking to achieve that sense of beauty and peace and serenity. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And what's coming to mind, which I think is really cool for us to always consider, I always think about this during Libra season, is how am I in relationships with those in my life in a one-on-one context? And so it's making me think of the 5 love languages. And so what I'm hearing from you is that Libra, Venus, love, is perhaps more like words of affirmation. Like it's through the dialogue, it's through the communication. Whereas Taurus could be more like gifts or like acts of service, which is
right.
more practical. So what else is there? There's quality time, which I actually might give to Libra because it's like we're spending time together and we're having interaction, but I could also see Taurus being into the quality time too. And then physical touch, which would probably go toward Taurus, I'm assuming, since it's like more body oriented. But I do think, Libra might like all of these too, because it's still about love. So, but yeah, I'm just reflecting that back. That's kind of what I was hearing you say, is that when you use the word conceptual for Libra, it did make me think of the words as an act of love. And here we are using our words today. So, yeah. So we are here recording this on the last day of Virgo season, just as we're heading into Libra season. And I really always feel this time of year, particularly like this last day. It's the last day of summer here on the Northern Hemisphere. And I can feel the scales beginning to tip. Like I normally will practice yoga out on my patio in the morning, and it's a bit too chilly this morning to do that. So like it's starting to tip. And globally, there's a recalibration that happens during Libra season too. Like Southern Hemisphere, right? They're going into spring. And so in the world around us, but also within ourselves, we're all we have this equal day and night thing happening.
Yes.
And so it's cool. And we're here in the last day of Virgo season. We were kind of joking on the phone last night about how you were like deep cleaning your apartment. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're getting like the last few bits of Virgo season out of you. What do you sense about the Virgo Libra cusp time of year? And as an astrologer, do you work with cusp energy?
Yeah. Yes, I do work with cusp energy. I am the kind of person where obviously when I'm doing someone's chart, I'm going to look at that degree So even if it's something like 29 degrees, 58 minutes into the sign of Virgo, I'll tell the person your sun sign is Virgo. But I am aware of the fact that I do think energies start to bleed over when you get to those last kind of critical degrees. So I work with cusp energy because I find that it's relevant. Also, usually with people like, you know, even if their sun is technically in another sign, typically you will see the next sign appear in the chart in some prominent way anyway, their Mercury or right. Oftentimes I actually find their ascendant or something, or you know, the ruler of that sign may be prominent in the chart. So it shows up in other ways anyway. But yeah, the Virgo Libra cusp, it is interesting because it's all, I think, always going into the cardinal energy, because those are seasonal signs. Those shifts are very drastically felt because of everything you just kind of spoke about, is that real shift of how we're navigating our days and our weather, and, you know, just the kind of energetic climate that cardinal signs, I think, really usher in. So not just the Virgo to Libra shift, but all of the cardinal signs, Libra, Capricorn, Aries, and Cancer. I feel like those shifts are very drastically felt, maybe more so than other cusp signs. Yeah, for me, there is a productivity that I think starts to happen just because summer feels more, you know, playful and rejuvenative and relaxing, and, you know, you kind of recoup during summer. And as fall starts to come into play, especially, you know, here, and with that Virgo energy kind of, I don't know, getting us, it seems like the perfect energy to transition from summer into fall, because it's like, okay, it's time to kind of tidy up and get organized again and get ready to get back to work. So I do find that resonates for me.
I always feel the cusp energy really strongly, like the last few days of an astrological season. It's like things start to feel heightened, and I'll even find things happen around me that indicate to me that we're transitioning. So for example, yesterday I went on an early morning walk, and which is also interesting because it's the first morning I've really been able to go outside because of the fires here in Oregon. And so I was just like, wow, like I can breathe again. I'm feeling the air element. Libra's coming. It's cool in the morning. But I was walking down the street and I was listening to a podcast. And in the podcast, they were talking about the heart. They kept saying the heart. And then I saw this sign that was like in front of a coffee shop or something. And the coffee shop's called Heart. And I was wow. I was like, whoa, interesting timing. So I stopped to take a picture of the sign that said Heart. And then a person came to the front door that was working, and she was like, hey, what's going on? And I was like, well, I told her the story that I just told you. And then she goes, oh, you're Jeff Hinshaw. And I was like, what? She's like, yes, you went to school in college 10 years ago with my best friend, Michael. And he told me that you moved to Portland. And it was like, it's like the heart, Venus, and then this like relationship. She's like, and I'd love to offer you a free coffee, you know? So there was like this, like, I find that like in the last few days of Virgo season, there's always something that's like, oh, we're about to go into Libra. And I don't know if that's as an astrologer, like I'm just like getting ready and like we're having this conversation about Libra, like before we actually move into Libra season. I'm just sharing that because especially during like an air season, be very like mindful of the people around you and the words that you're hearing and the signs that you see and what you're listening to on podcasts, because it's this air element, it's really heightened for us. And there's a lot of opportunities for us to start having clues that help align us. And I think for me, I was kind of like in this weird headspace of like, why did I move to Portland? Is it right for me to be here? And then like something like that happened that was like, no, this is okay. Like you're making connections with people, and just be open to it and like drop into this heart place, because this air element can make us somewhat mental. And also we know Virgo seasons, like Virgo's ruled by Mercury. So softening into the heart, realigning here is something that I'm thinking about.
Yeah. And I guess, again, speaking to what you're saying about that air energy, or, even in like the tarot, that sword energy that has to do with your mental wits, your mental clarity, your mental sharpness, and how that can sometimes become detached. And what I was saying before about, Libra obviously being represented by Venus, which has so much to do with love and relationship and value and worthiness and harmony and peace and balance, but it's the ideas of it. It's that, that kind of air, or even with what you experienced, it's like you were getting messages, you heard something and then you saw something and it led to a connection. So it's very interesting.
Yes. So before we get into the transit, I like to do this thing with the guests on the show called Cosmic Slip and Slide, where I ask you, and it's sort of like a warm up for us before we get into the transits, but I'm going to ask you as many questions as we can get through in 60 seconds, and they're going to relate to Libra. And so you can answer them as quick as you want. You can take your time with them, and whatever.
Can I plead the fifth?
If you want to pass one, you can also say skip or pass. Okay. And does that sound okay?
Yes, it sounds
okay. Fine. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna put 60 seconds on the clock.
Oh, you're serious. You're timing it. Okay.
All right. So let's start now. What color do you most associate with Libra?
This is probably biased because I'm a Libra and they're my favorite colors, but purple and green.
Which astrological sign is Libra most likely to collaborate with?
I think any other air sign.
Besides Venus, which planet do you think Libra is most deeply connected to?
I know the esoteric ruler is Uranus.
Yes.
And that resonates. Yeah. But I think about Neptune because Neptune's the higher octave of Venus.
What iconic Libra do you feel most inspired by?
Oh my goodness. So many. There's so many iconic Libras. I'll say Coltrane.
Nice. Fill in the blank. Libra was late to the party because they were too busy
making sure that they were beautiful and the hottest thing at the party.
Describe Libra in just 3 words.
Refined, cultured, fair.
What is the best self-care for a Libra?
Definitely making sure that we pace ourselves. I think all cardinal energy can get into being very kind of busy, but Libras, yeah, there can be maybe this mental busyness, and I think we need to learn how to pace ourselves. I think that's also a part of figuring out how to find that inner balance.
So we're past the 60 seconds, but I'm just enjoying listening to what you're sharing. And I have 3 more questions. What is Libra's superpower?
Objectivity.
Besides Libra and Taurus, what sign do you think Venus loves to be in?
Ooh, I like Venus and Leo. I do like that energy.
Which we'll talk about today.
Yeah.
And then finally, what art form do you most connect with to Libra?
I guess some kind of literary art, maybe poetry.
Beautiful. I was actually listening. Bell Hooks is someone that I often think of with Libra. And yeah. I was listening to one of her talks earlier this week. And in it, she said that I like to remind people that I was a poet before I was an activist.
Yeah, that's a super Libran thing to say. And even for me, I wrote my whole life. And I wrote poems before I wrote songs.
Wow. So you're a musician. And I remember you were saying, we were chatting last night, and you said something about how a lot of the other musicians that you collaborate with happen to be Libras.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Coltrane too.
Yes. There are so many ridiculously amazing Libra jazz musicians, actually.
What about Coltrane's work speaks to you of Libra?
Certainly his ability, especially later in his career, to kind of blend these different, almost like blending these different ideologies, by experimenting with more Southeast Asian tonalities and incorporating that into jazz, and then Also embracing more of a free expression, and feels very Libran. Also feels that does feel a bit Sagittarian too. I actually wonder what Coltrane's chart looks like.
It's interesting because when I think of Coltrane too, I also think of Coltrane's partner, Alice Coltrane, too,
right?
Which
yes.
is also feeling quite Libra. And I know Alice Coltrane is a Sagittarius rising.
Interesting, yeah.
But
and she also did that in her music. I mean, they're both geniuses in their own right, and yeah, and like maybe the ultimate musical power couple.
So I'm looking at John Coltrane's chart and has a Sagittarius midheaven.
There you go.
Yeah, and also is a Pisces rising.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And birthday is September 23rd, so happy birthday to John Coltrane. Yeah, but you're also a musician yourself, and I'd like to share a song with the Cosmic Cousins listeners as we transition into looking at the transits for Libra season. I would like to play two of your songs. I mean, the two songs that I saw on Spotify both feel very Libra to me. Like there's a lot of Libra themes in them, which is Like a Dream and Decay are the two.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Like a Dream, that's a throwback right there.
That's it. Do either of those songs speak to you of Libra, or was there another song that you had in mind?
Decay feels, I feel like maybe I'm digging into my Venus and Scorpio with that one, because there is kind of a scorpionic theme to it and speaking about decay. But even if you listen to the lyrics and, you know, the way I'm singing and even the album art, it is very Venusian, and that was kind of the point. Because that song, I'm talking about my struggle with chronic Lyme disease. And, you know, with so many chronic illnesses, things can appear to be totally fine on the surface. You know, and even when I first got sick and was first treating, I had to eat really restricted diet and was taking all these supplements, and people would see me and be like, "Oh, you look great." I'm like, I'm over here fighting for my life, but thank you. You know what I mean? So kind of having that maybe Venusian outer layer, but that more Plutonian inner layer, I think is relevant with decay. And then Like a Dream feels Neptunian to me. And it even, you know, dream is in the title.
Why don't we listen to Decay first? And then I think we do have an aspect where Venus is in opposition to Neptune later on in Libra season, which might be cool for us to listen to that one then.
Right.
But as hearing you talk about decay and your Venus in Scorpio, that is calling to mind for us this Libra season. We do have Mercury entering Scorpio. And I'm also thinking about, it's just a very strong Pluto year in general, 2020, with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Mm-hmm. And all of our Plutos are up for grabs. We're all getting to know Pluto in our own chart because of it. And there's a lot of people listening to this who likely have Pluto in Libra. And Pluto in Libra, for those of you that have this natal energy, Libra season is a Plutonian time of year for you. So this song might also speak to some of that too. So why don't we go ahead and listen to Decay now?
you keep not killing me. You just wanna defeat me. You trying to play me, got me acting like I'm crazy. But frankly, I don't wanna be around this. I don't wanna stand for your bullshit. My enemy, I keep fighting, but you keep killing me. You just wanna see my spirit dissipate. You want my body to disintegrate, but I refuse to just wither away. I want to come to this decay. Trying to play me, got me feeling like I'm crazy. Frankly, I don't want to be a brother. I don't want to stand for your bullshit. Playing for the ages. I never thought I would be twisted to defeat me like this. I know my spirit hasn't quit. Crazy. Frankly, I don't want to be a brother. I don't want to stand for your bullshit. Play unawake. Fight until you stop killing me.
Wow. It's so interesting hearing your introduction to the song, because when I first listened to it, I thought you were speaking to a lover.
Yes, that is also the point. I personified my disease.
Yes, which feels quite Libra to do that, but also like knowing that you're a Venus and Scorpio, it's like
Yes.
deep. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, so we'll kind of keep that in mind as we look at this first part of Libra season. So I've kind of separated it into 3 different parts, which we can look at as the 3 different decans of Libra. So our first talk of the transits will be Libra season part 1, which will be Sun in Libra from 0 degree all the way to the 9th degree. And so this is September 22nd through September 30th. So for those of you listening, this will be taking us through the end of September. And I'll just say the main transits first so that we have them in our mind, and then we'll kind of go back and look at each one. So on September 24th, Mercury is opposition Mars. That's Mercury in Libra opposition Mars in Aries. And then September 27th, then Mercury shifts into Scorpio, which is connecting us to this song 𝓃𝓐. And even the emoji that the Cosmic Cousins listeners chose for Scorpio is the wilting red rose. And I think he even used the word wilting in the song.
Yeah, and 𝓃𝓐, the album cover, the photo shoot I did, or the single cover rather, I'm surrounded by dead flowers.
Wow. Okay, so you'll have to send that over to us so I can post that.
Okay.
And then, so we got Mercury opposition Mars, then Mercury enters Scorpio. And then on September 28th, Venus in Leo is trine Mars in Aries. And then we end September with this really interesting transit, which is Mars is square Saturn as Saturn goes direct. And that's September. So let's kind of go back. So Thursday, September 24th, Mercury's in Libra opposition to Mars in Aries retrograde.
You know, sometimes when I am reflecting on different transits or astrological positions, I get a song, like a song lyric or something will come to mind. And first, that Mercury opposing Mars, there is this kind of dynamic communicative element that creates. But Mars is retrograde. So it made me think of that Supreme's lyric, think it over. Yeah. Think it over. Hey. Which also feels like an appropriate precursor to the Mercury retrograde that comes like soon afterwards.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of my first thought. Mars.
I'm loving that songs come up in mind because I know you have Neptune on your ascendant too.
Yeah. Yes.
It's beautiful.
Mars is obviously our will and our drive and kind of the action oriented part of the self. And, I feel like with all Mercury Mars aspects, there is kind of this very willful, sometimes even forceful communicative element. But with Mars retrograde, it really does make me feel like there's more of a reflective element there. And we were talking about how the Mars retrograde for me has created kind of me having to not only reassess my drives and what motivates me and how I do things, but also putting me in touch with maybe some repressed anger or some repressed desires or feelings or emotions, which I think is really powerful. And with that aspect to Mercury, it can give us a little bit more of that conscious component.
Yeah, Mars retrograde feels right now it feels so internal, but what I'm doing with my hand is I'm kind of like when I think of Mars, it would normally be like pointing an arrow like out, using your hand to kind of like point in a direction, but like Mars retrograde, I'm like pointing it towards me. It's like, it feels so internal and almost like I'm like drilling like into my solar plexus and heart area, like it deeply internal. And so with this opposition to Mercury and Libra, it almost feels like there could be a lot of projecting onto relationships about work that we're meant to do within, which in context to us moving into this election season too, I think we might see a lot of that like projection going on in us and the world around us. And that's all an invitation for us to continue to because we also have Chiron in Aries right now.
Right.
And there's a lot, it almost feels like there's a breaking open of our own sense of self and identity at this time, and finding ways to be able to communicate that with people that you feel safe with, and that will be able to reflect back to you the growth that you've done throughout 2020. It's been such a heightened year. So I feel like it's so interesting if we're thinking this is the first time I've ever collaborated with someone to do a month ahead transit forecast. Right. And this does feel like Mercury and Libra, we're communicating in a collaborative way. And Mars retrograde, I'm really asking myself as an individual, how do I want to recalibrate my life and my work and my offerings? There is this sort of opposition going on.
But it's a productive, use of the opposition. It's a constructive use of the opposition, as opposed to when oppositions are out of balance. Well, oppositions are all about trying to find balance between two things that feel diametrically opposed, but actually have quite a bit of common ground. It's like two sides of the same coin. Making sure that we are more collaborative, and even turning, like you said, turning to those that we trust to maybe help us deal with the things that we might be struggling with, or, kind of internal combative things that we're navigating, as opposed to projecting our inner turmoil or frustration onto other people.
And not being afraid to ask people in your life for help or for like insight, but also knowing that it still comes down to you as an individual to make the shifts and realignments in your life. So this is like a theme that carries on in Libra season, because we know we're building up to the Aries full moon, and there's just a lot of opposition and squares happening. So you kind of start Libra off with this, and then Mercury enters Scorpio on Sunday, September 27th.
And I have Mercury in Scorpio natally. So
what could you share with us about what you've learned about this natal placement?
It is an interesting one to have. It can be a really insightful placement to have, just thinking about how Scorpio deals with the more hidden, taboo, secretive elements of life, or even the things in life that sometimes we don't want to look at, we don't want to deal with. And Mercury is our conscious mind. It's how we reason and process and communicate and really engage from a more conscious place. So it's really interesting having that placement, because it does make a mind that can be quite penetrative and interested in exploring the depths and interested in exploring the things that are more hidden or in the shadows. And it can, like I said, be really insightful. There's a lot of wisdom that can come from having that kind of mercurial energy. But at the same time, it's kind of a heavy placement, because you're constantly navigating those depths, in ways that few others probably are, unless they also have some kind of Pluto Mercury aspect in their chart.
Right.
So yeah, and then for me, it's interesting too, because I feel like there is obviously a privacy that is associated with that scorpionic energy.
So as Mercury enters Scorpio, a good use of this energy might be for people to go deeper into their psychology. Like, it does feel like therapy, or just like a tarot reading, or like having some sort of practice that allows you to reflect on the deeper themes in your life could be really,
Absolutely.
really useful. Because I also think of Mercury in Scorpio as like the rabbit hole of like,
yes, absolutely,
just diving deep into the darkness. And it's like, with this, we already know with the Mercury opposition Mars retrograde that a lot of this is inviting us to go deeper into ourself. And so as Mercury shifts into Scorpio, it's saying, let's go even deeper.
And Mars retrograde does have a bit of that scorpionic quality to it anyway,
right?
Because, Mars obviously rules Aries, and Mars is in Aries right now. To me, that is that more forward, external manifestation of Mars. Whereas when Mars goes retrograde, there's already a more scorpionic quality that it takes on. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it makes me think of the esoteric phrase for Scorpio is, warrior am I, and from the battle I emerge triumphant. So I always think of like Scorpio's esoteric ruler is Mars. And there's definitely this like, it's a very Martian month, which is interesting because it's Libra season. And we're like looking more towards Venus, which is going to take us into this next aspect, which is a really lovely aspect, I think, which is Monday, September 28th, Venus in Leo trines Mars in Aries retrograde. So there's a bit of a shift more towards the creative, I would imagine here. What are you sensing with, you said earlier, Venus in Leo is one of your favorite placements, or Venus's favorite placements for Leo besides Libra and Taurus.
I do, because I like that combination of, the sun and Venus, or, the heart. Leo is obviously rules the heart. And so there's something very, just really passionate and loving, about that Venus and Leo placement. It's like the people who are in love with love.
I love love.
Yes.
Okay. So how about it trining this Mars in Aries?
I do absolutely think you hit the nail on the head with talking about creative momentum. And again, with Mars being retrograde, it's, thinking about how you imagine, how you dream, how you create, and how that can be then translated into something that breeds collaboration. As opposed to competition, which is also, I think, the shadow side of that Martian energy. I think there's also something that can be kind of reinvigorating in how we're navigating relationship, and especially romance. Because, when Venus and Mars come together, there is this kind of sensual, sexual, even kind of counterpart energy, because you have your quintessential masculine energy coming into contact with your quintessential feminine energy. And so they're natural counterparts in that way. And so I do think with the trine, there is kind of, there's opportunity for some ebb and flow in the areas of romance. whether that be the retrograde thing. The reason I said reinvigorating is because it makes me think of kind of, renewing a passion in maybe pre-existing relationships. But I do think it's also something that could provide maybe completely new opportunities for love as well.
Yes. I love that you're saying renewing, because this is connecting us to that retrograde energy, renewing passion, but it could also be completely new because it's like Aries, the new life, and the connection to love with Venus. So we've got romance, passion, creativity, also another word, which is reinvigorating. So there is sort of like this like reset, and even if it's not relationships, if we're thinking of Venus as like your creative passions, I definitely am going to make sure I'm utilizing this energy on Monday, September 28th, to carve out space in that day and just within that few day period to connect to my creative projects that are outside of like my work duties, which I think is really, really important for us during Libra season, to find that balance between what is my offering for other people, but how am I taking care of myself? And so I'm definitely like wanting to get more connected to dance and art and all of these things. So we're still in Libra season, and this Venus trine Mars feels like a great use of that energy.
And that balance you speak of too is, speaks to the larger theme of value, what it is that we value, which is what Venus is all about as well.
And then this will end our part 1 of Libra season. Right after that trine, it's all these Mars themes. We then have Mars square Saturn on Tuesday, September 29th, and then Saturn goes direct in Capricorn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I think that just makes me think about our boundaries really being tested. Saturn is boundaries, Saturn is restrictions, Saturn is limitations, Saturn is rules, Saturn is what we know, that is tried, tested, and true, and is often what we're building our foundation on. And as it rules Capricorn, that does speak to a societal understanding of our foundation as well. And that square is obviously a tense aspect, a hard aspect, but it's a dynamic aspect. It's calling something into question that has an urgency to it.
Yeah.
And with Mars, Mars is all about, again, what we're taking action in, how we're moving, what is driving us, our willpower. So it does make me think of boundaries being tested or limits being tested. It could feel like a very challenging time. And again, considering that Mars is retrograde, this may be something that you're internally having to restructure within your own framework. But I think it's something that's beneficial, because squares they're not just the boogeyman, they provide opportunity for growth and really for mastery when that dynamic energy is channeled in a productive way.
Yeah. And this is the second of 3 squares that Mars has with Saturn.
Yes.
This year in 2020. So we've already experienced that. And that was earlier, I think in August. And I'm Saturn in Capricorn. I mean, we're seeing it. Capricorn's about society. It's about our government, our environment. And then this is with Saturn, it's at home here in Capricorn, and Saturn is really, can be restriction, or it can also be inviting us to step up to the plate, to our most responsible self. And so this Mars square Saturn almost feels like, well, if we're thinking of Venus trine Mars just the day before, it's like the party. And then it's like, oh, but we're like in the middle of a pandemic. Is a square.
That's good. Yeah, that's
and it's sort of like just reminding us of that. Or like when I'm thinking of, if I'm working on a creative project with this Venus trine Mars energy, I initially wanted to write the Zodiac Queens book back in March, and then the pandemic happened and I wasn't able to. So I'm also reconsidering this time as a time for me to reconnect with that project. Right. And Saturn is like, okay, are you really going to commit to it? Or Saturn also asking me, is this really in alignment with how we are evolving as humans? Is this ethically aligned? Is this morally aligned? I mean, these are questions that I'm asking myself. Is this what people need to hear right now? Right. So, and I don't necessarily even need to share that answer with you all, because it is this Mars retrograde. I'm going in and kind of like diving deeper into that. And then Mercury, we know, is in Scorpio too. So we're going into the psychology of it. So yeah, this is part 1 of Libra season. Some of the key words that we said is renewing passion, diving deeper into the self, projecting onto others in relationships, and also coming up against this like Saturn wall of responsibility. So these are some of the themes for part 1. And so now that we've reflected on this first decan of Libra, are there any like final words that you would like to offer us?
I think we will be entering Libra season with a bang that is internal.
And this is all building us up for the Aries full moon, which starts us off with part 2 of Libra season, which is October 1st through October 11th. I think even before we say the transits for part 2 of Libra season, which will take us through the 10 degrees of Libra, 10th degree to the 19th degree, just with this Aries full moon culmination here on October 1st, starting October off with, as you said, starting Libra season off with a bang, but also starting October off this really heightened full moon.
That'll be an interesting one, because we're faced with the polarity of self and others in a really extreme way. I mean, that's just kind of the most obvious energetic that full moon presents. You know, the moon is speaking to our needs, our inner selves, our souls. And moon in Aries has that kind of self, both explorative and also establishing quality to it. And then, you know, the sun, which is our overall kind of ego expression, being in Libra, having to do with others and, you know, how we hold space for others, how we understand people. And it's kind of the first, it's interesting because Libra is the first sign of the top half of the natal chart, right? It's the first of the quote unquote social signs. And it's the first sign where you're dealing with the collective, really. And so that'll be an interesting polarity, I think, to navigate. And it's also why, you know, Sun is in fall in Libra. It's not necessarily the most ideal placement for Libra, whereas it's exalted in Aries because Sun does great in a sign like Aries. So having kind of that flip and that polarity with the moon coming into Aries, where we're thinking about our needs, we're thinking about what is going to emotionally satiate us and how to get it. Again, Mars speaks to that how, or the action of that energy, whereas, you know, Sun in Libra is trying to find some calibration or some equilibrium between self desires and also the desires and the needs of others.
I always like to look to people who are prominent in our current world that hold this energy. And this is interesting because Libra Sun, Aries Moon is
Kamala.
And we know that we're going into the debate season. So Kamala Harris has this combo. So we can also maybe collectively look to see what's going on with Kamala Harris at this time. Also in that very like Libra-like way, it's not just Kamala Harris, but also Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. There's sort of this like mirroring or even twinning kind of thing with Libra and Gemini that I usually find comes in twos. And so also AOC has this combo too. And I love thinking of AOC with Libra, Sun, Aries, Moon. We really feel that with her and her very direct way of communicating, and has such a way with words that is sort of like the sword that kind of like pierces straight to the truth. but we know like the underbelly of it is Aries moon, which is this like fierce kind of like warrior-like energy of carving out a path for the new life. So we can also look to that for some inspiration. Yeah. Any thoughts on either of these two women?
Sure. Well, the interesting thing with Kamala and that inherent polarity in her chart is that it's probably emphasized by the fact that she has a Gemini rising.
Mm-hmm.
And she also has North Node in Gemini right on the ascendant. And so it's interesting because, the North Node
is in Gemini right now.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And we know that Trump also has that placement. So lots of synchronicity going on that front. But I think about with Kamala, she's biracial, and her identity has been, I'm sure, something that she's had to navigate her whole life, and it's something that has also had this kind of public element of scrutiny. And then also her politics in terms of how does she align. There's been a lot of criticism around her, having these kind of harsh policies as a prosecutor. And then, now there's this sense that there's maybe a need to be more progressive or prove that she really is progressive. And so it's just interesting. It's just like these really kind of stark contrasts and polarities that are so present in like every facet of her life.
Which also acts as this almost like archetypal energy of what we all are facing at this time. And it's so present. Like when I think of the Gemini North Node right now, it's an invitation for all of us to look at duality that's taking place in the world and to create dialogue and conversation around it. And here we have this figure who's a Libra sun, Aries moon, Gemini rising, that's saying, and we're going to talk about it. And it's here in Libra season. We know we have this Aries polarity build up to the Aries full moon. And so around October 1st, let's kind of like pay attention to some of these themes that we're talking about and how they might arise in our life, and continue to remember as it's Libra season, which is an air season, the Gemini North Node is getting really activated for all of us. And so it's a continual invitation for us to ask, how are we evolving towards Gemini at this time?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
in this segment of the Libra Sun transit, where we're going from the teens, is going to start to put us in the place kind of in the later teens where the Sun starts to trine the North Node,
right?
Which I think we get an exact trine around maybe the Libra new moon. I think we might end up with a exact trine.
Yeah. I can look that up right now. So during this Libra season, particularly October, since that's where we're at right now, the North Node in Gemini will move from 23 degrees, starts off at 23 degrees and ends Libra season at 21 degrees. So yeah, it'll be Sun will trine right at the beginning of part 3, the North Node.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Which will take us into the Libra new moon, as you said. So we'll revisit that theme there. So, but part 2, Aries full moon, October 1st. Then Venus enters Virgo, October 2nd. Pluto stations direct, October 4th. Mars square Pluto. And then Venus trine Uranus, October 10th. And then we end it with, well, I think we'll end it with that one for simplicity's sake, with Venus trine Uranus. So again, Aries full moon, Venus enters Virgo, Pluto direct, Mars square Pluto, and then Venus trine Uranus. This is part 2. Definite shift of energy. We talked about the Aries full moon. How about Friday on Venus's day, Friday, October 2nd, Venus enters Virgo?
That's an interesting one because obviously Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and that can be more methodical, practical, focus on the logistics of things. And so you you have a combination that's taking the head into the desire space of Venus. So I think we might be feeling a desire of kind of carrying on that Virgo energy that we had, continuing to have a desire to get organized, to be practical, and to have that, be the thing that is the most appealing and satiating for us during that transit. This is also a time where I think, the Virgo use of that mercurial energy is, how can I have communication and build community in ways that are not just practical, but also speak to some kind of greater good. It's that service energy that Virgo holds. And so I do think that is also going to be a beneficial transit for us during this time.
Well, we know Libra is ruled by Venus, so this shift into Virgo, it does bring us into this. It almost feels like, okay, September, it's like you had that Venus and Leo moment of expressing yourself, reigniting passion, maybe even, in romance, we could even say, but creatively too. But as we shift, it's right after the full moon, which I always think the phase right after the full moon is kind of like the cleanup after the party anyway. And so there's almost like this time where it's like, okay, did you register to vote? Okay,
right.
How are you volunteering your services to the world? I mean, Libra, which is about social justice, really, in one of its highest, we would say answering to Venus and Virgo is really asking us to start implementing these things into our life in a really practical and real way. When I think of someone famous that has this combo of Libra sun with Venus and Virgo, I like to think of Amma, who is the hugging saint, who has done tremendous work in India of creating a sacred space, which I think of this Libra Virgo combo as like creating a sacred space for healing, which is exactly what she's done. And so in our own life, Venus enters Virgo. I mean, Venus in Virgo does feel like making your home a sanctuary for you to start dealing with some of these more intense squares and oppositions that we're going to feel. And really, Venus in Virgo to me it feels very loving and nurturing in its higher expression.
Yes. It's like its higher expression.
It's like the mother who packs like lunch for their kids. Like it's like a very practical act of service. And so when we were talking about love languages with Venus earlier, Venus and Virgo is like acts of service to yourself and also to a world in need.
I would agree with all of
that. So maybe we'll just like keep focused on that higher expression for now. And that will take us into Pluto stationing direct.
Oh, Lord.
22nd degree. This is Sunday, October 4th. What has been your connection to Pluto and Capricorn?
Oh, well, this has been a really trying and immensely growth-oriented transit for me personally, because I am a Libra sun. So Pluto has been squaring my sun for the past couple years. At 22 degrees, you said it's stationing direct?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna feel that one because my sun is 21 degrees, 40 minutes. So it's like right there. Yeah, it really, in terms of my own experience with this transit, it has forced me to revolutionize and evolve my core identity. With it being a square, it has not been in the most easy ways, as something like maybe Pluto trining the sun would encourage, or the sextile. So, for instance, Lyme disease. I was diagnosed with Lyme 3 years ago. So yeah, personally, this has been a deeply transformative time. During this transit, that'll be something that is continued to be played out, not just for me, but for all of us as we go through that transit collectively.
We're seeing, Pluto is like this huge, and Capricorn is, for me as an astrologer, I'm looking at Pluto and Capricorn as the pandemic energy.
Yeah, especially with it conjunct Saturn.
Exactly. And so this moving direct on October 4th, it does feel like a forward movement with the energy of the pandemic. Whether that, I mean, it could manifest as like more cases start to come through, or we just start to receive more insights into that. But particularly this whole time period, Pluto in Capricorn 2008 to 2024, is a time where we're going deep into the psychology of the system that we are living in.
Yes.
Our government, the patriarchy, all of it. And really, for me, I'm asking, like, in going deep within myself and asking what it means for me to be someone who's white that lives on stolen land, and what it means to be in this system, and how I'm really going through and doing with Pluto, it's like intergenerational healing of acknowledging the shadows of the past and acknowledging the shadows of not just what's going on within me, but also what's connected to my parents and my grandparents and my great grandparents. So it's like a deep energy. And as it stations direct, I like seeing it station this direct motion because I'm ready for it to enter Aquarius. But we have 4 more years. So so some of these themes might be a bit more prominent for us, some of these thoughts, some of these feelings. And it's setting us up for the Mars square Pluto. So, which I'm looking at, like, Mars in Aries and all of the planets in Aries right now, Chiron, Black Moon, Lilith, Eris, Mars, as the fierce individual standing up against the system, Capricorn. And so we see that in the Black Lives Matter movement as this Aries stellium going up against the pandemic and the patriarchy, the Capricorn stellium. We also see it with people who are refusing to wear a mask, could be represented by the Aries stellium squaring the government, Capricorn. So October 9th, Mars squares Pluto, and there could be some tension here between the individual and the system.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I just, the intensity of Pluto is so subversive. It is the depths of our soul. And, for something like that to spend the past couple months retrograde and then to come out direct, which feels like, this cleansing or this purification, but it can come as the form of almost like this puking up of our pain, or, this puking up of, this kind of internal, deep, intense work that we've been doing during the retrograde. And then to get the square to Mars right after that, I just think that transit's really intense. And I initially did, when I was kind of thinking about my own ruminations and predictions for the year, I initially did think that October was the time that we were going to see probably a resurgence of more deaths from COVID, particularly because of those transits. But I think you're also right on it in terms of talking about that kind of activist quality of, Pluto coming through the sign of Capricorn, representing the system and the corruption of the system, a system that is in crisis, which is, very, very much not just Pluto and Capricorn, but speaks so much to the core of America's identity, because as we know, that's America's natal placement.
It's Pluto and Capricorn, right?
Right.
And even talking about this right now, I feel how this square is coming up for me in my own life, because I am right now stepping into a new moment in the podcast where these aren't necessarily things that I will normally be creating dialogue around. And it takes this like Libra conversation and this like Mars retrograde and Aries, like I'm going back within to myself, like towards this, maybe towards the wounds or towards what things that need to be healing. And I feel this square as like this feels a little vulnerable, be putting my work out in this new sort of way or this new lens. And so we might all be feeling like we're kind of reshifting. And I mean, that analogy of you saying like Pluto stationing direct is like puking. I feel that so strongly. So what do we do when we puke? Well, it's like great for us to have rest and to drink lots of water. And so I think that is, as we have this full moon and like go into the waning phases of the moon towards the new moon, really like dialing back on self-care, utilizing Venus and Virgo as an opportunity to connect in relationship through help and through service. And and then that takes us into ending out the part 2 of Libra season on October 10th. Venus will trine Uranus in Taurus.
Yeah. Also, just thinking about what we're talking about in terms of the pandemic and, this health crisis, it also feels very apropos for Venus to come into a sign like Virgo at a time like that as well.
Yes.
And how that can be beneficial. And so even with this trine, Uranus and Taurus, I've been talking about this transit a lot this year because I
got that Taurus moon.
Yeah. It's been something really powerful for me. It hasn't quite come close enough to my moon to conjunct it yet. It won't for a couple more years. It's actually interesting. I had the moon in Taurus Uranus conjunction in my solar return chart for last year. So I have been actually working with the energy in a personal way. But I've been talking about that transit because, Uranus and Taurus are two things that, you wouldn't think get along. They naturally, as Uranus as the ruler of Aquarius and Taurus being signs that are squaring each other. Mostly because Taurus, as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, speaks to security and speaks to kind of slow growth because of that, and wants to grow in ways that doesn't feel threatening to that security, which is why there is a stubbornness and sometimes a resistance to change associated with that. Whereas Uranus is like the most unpredictable change you can get. Like you have no idea how to really, hone in on what that energy is going to do. Which is also the beauty of that energy, is this kind of radical, revolutionized change that can be abrupt or sudden or, just very innately unpredictable. And so I think we've seen that manifest in terms of our values being revolutionized and changed. Certainly, like the second that I think the day Uranus went direct in Taurus earlier in the year, the stock market had a huge plummet. We've been seeing an uptick in natural disasters, which also makes sense because Taurus is that fixed earth energy. But this also speaks to a real need to change how we navigate value in real tangible ways. So, I think that's a transit that lends itself to becoming more conscious about the environment and about having things that are more sustainable for the earth, revolutionizing how we understand money, revolutionizing how we understand, the tangible things that we value. And so with Venus making a trine, which obviously Venus is the natural ruler of Taurus, making that trine to Uranus and Taurus, it feels like there's kind of a more invited opportunity to be able to do some of that. And again, with Venus and Virgo, in ways that feel sensible, that feel practical and
service oriented.
Yeah.
I mean, this is feeling like if we had one transit of Libra season, this to me feels like the most important for us to hone in on, because we've got Venus, the traditional ruler of Libra, Uranus, the esoteric ruler for Libra.
Right. Yeah.
They're trining one another in this very earthy, practical energy. And so Uranus as the esoteric ruler for Libra is, I feel that with someone like 𝓛𝓲𝓫𝓻𝓪 𝓢𝓮𝓪, who is a revolutionary. And so right now the revolution is around our values. And it makes me think, just a few days ago, I got to go, and this also feels like the little like intro into Libra season at the end of Virgo season, the cusp portal. Just a few days ago, for the first time, I went to a cooperative garden here in Portland. And the person that I went with let me like harvest a bunch of food and bring it home. And it felt so revolutionary for me, which is funny. Like Uranus and Taurus, it's like revolutionary for us to be like growing our own food, or it's revolutionary for us to be spending more time in nature. Like I feel this sort of like buzz and excitement. And when we even look at different statistics of this year, all businesses have dropped. Restaurants and cafes in our local immediate surroundings have dropped the number of people who have like walked into their store, but parks have exponentially increased this year, which feels very Uranus and Taurus to me. Oh, wow, how revolutionary. We're spending time out in nature, you know? And so there is this energy that I feel with Uranus and Taurus, but it's interesting for Libra to be esoterically ruled by Uranus in the other Venus sign of Taurus. And I think that for anyone who is a Libra, or anyone who is a Taurus, like this Libra season really offers you a lot of opportunity to explore, what does Uranus and Taurus mean for me? And anyone who's also, you know, has Venus and Virgo or another earth sign, like there's a lot of opportunity here for us to come up with new solutions. Uranus is technology for the health of our body, but also the health of our environment and nature. And so there's like this like realignment that's taking us, it's like the right at the end of part 2 of Libra season, October 10th. Yeah. Really cool. So I'm loving that one. So we have part 2, soul purging is what I'm calling the puking here. We've got soul purging, but also health and radical security.
Mm-hmm. Right on.
Yeah. And then finally, we'll transition into part 3, which is going to take us this October 12th through October 22nd. This is Libra 20th degree to 29th degree, which this is where your sun is. So we're coming up to your birthday, your solar return. What is your experience of being here in the later degrees as someone with this Libra sun? And like, how would that also connect us to what we might anticipate in this part 3 of Libra season?
Well, you know, as we progress through a sign, the energy shifts. There's a maturation that does happen. And when you get to that critical degree or that anaretic degree, that is a degree that speaks to, you know, a sign at its most wise and realized, but also kind of weary and frustrated because it's been in that energy for a while. So, it does. There is something aged about being in the later degrees of a sign. I think, you know, you're getting to a maybe more experienced or matured energy of what that sign can offer, or, you know, what that energy really can represent, which is an interesting vantage point to have. Whereas, you know, the early degrees is kind of that new life that is breathed into that sign, and the middle degrees is kind of navigating the transition. You know, it's you're kind of holding space for both and figuring out how to transition into later part, which actually feels quite Libran. Probably those teen degree Libras feel the most Libra.
Yeah. So this part 3 is interesting because it starts us off with Mercury retrograde. Mm-hmm. So Wednesday, October 13th, Mercury retrograde. Mercury makes it all the way up to the 11th degree of Scorpio. And then when we get into Scorpio season, Mercury will re-enter back into Libra. So we won't visit that now, but just knowing that Mercury goes up to the 11th degree. And then Friday, October 16th, we have the Libra new moon.
Yes.
which feels quite nice to have this new moon in the later degrees of Libra. And then we end out part 3 with the Venus opposition to Neptune, Venus in Virgo opposition Neptune in Pisces, then Venus trine Jupiter, and then Venus trine Pluto. And that is the last day of Libra season. Just to kind of give us some foreshadowing, the Venus trine Pluto, the 2 ruling planets for Libra and then Scorpio, as we're like on this cusp of Scorpio. So this is part 3, and it's another shift of energy. So we'll start with the Mercury retrograde. It's interesting. Wednesday, Mercury's day, Mercury retrograde, and this is October 13th, right? So, okay. So how do you work with and navigate Mercury retrograde as an astrologer? There's a lot of fear attached to Mercury retrograde. Maybe we could even dispel a little bit of that fear.
Yeah, it's certainly over sensationalized. I look at what's going on with the Mercury retrogrades. I don't just think like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde, everything's going to go insane. Some Mercury retrogrades are incredibly healing because of the reflective energy it encourages. Some Mercury retrogrades certainly have more communicative disputes or misunderstandings. I know there's myth around don't start anything new, don't sign a contract, don't blah, 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 blah. I think obviously, there are more ideal times to do certain things, but sometimes you don't have a choice. And so I think Mercury retrograde really more than anything, instead of it needing to be this like superstitious like time, it's like it's a time to really cross all your T's and dot all your I's. It's a time to make sure you read the fine print and that you didn't gloss over the contract. It's a time to really be intentional about what you're saying, because communication is more sensitive, or potentially more sensitive. Also Mercury retrograde is infamously known for having technology go haywire, which I've been finding, because Uranus is retrograde again, has been really intense for me actually, because to me, Uranus being that higher octave of Mercury and, kind of the modern ruler of technology, I think actually is maybe even a little bit more potentially troublemaking in terms of the realm of the functionality of technology. So it'll be interesting to actually have both of those retrograde at the same time in opposing signs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And actually,
right around the degree of Uranus too.
That's right. Yeah, when it stations direct, it'll be making that opposition, which will be interesting. Yeah. Now that is something that makes me think that communication could be potentially more inflammatory or unpredictable because of the hard aspect to Uranus.
And that's Donald Trump, Gemini, ruled by Mercury, but also has Uranus conjunct
in his stellium. Yeah. So that is an interesting thing to consider as we move deeper into election season, for sure. And
so making sure if you're mailing in your vote, making sure that you have double checked the address and you're doing everything, to a T, and especially just like before you like send an email out or engage with someone in conversation, Libra season is always an invitation to drop into the heart and to pause for a moment. I mean, I think of Libra as like taking a deep breath, air, and just like really realigning before engaging in communication. And this is taking us right into the Libra new moon, which is interesting, which Libra new moon is also that kind of, for me, a deeply internal time. All new moons are to really come back to your own internal balance. I mean, it could also connect us to relationships too, but when I think Libra new moon, it does feel like, oh, I'm bringing balance to myself in a very nurturing and healing way. And so Friday, October 16th is the Libra new moon.
I think there will be I think there's going to be high energy. And I think there's a potential for a lot of certainly personal recalibration, which we've been talking about a lot. But I really think that this is actually going to be more intensified in our relationships as that becomes amplified amplified by having sun and moon in the sign of Libra. I don't know. It just feels like the whole month of October particularly starts to intensify more and more in terms of how we're navigating our own inner framework and how that's expressed and explored, both on an interpersonal level with all this Libra energy, but then again with on a societal level with all this Capricorn energy. And all of these things, the Mars in terms of the personal, the Capricorn in terms of the societal, and the Libra in terms of the interpersonal relationships, they're all squaring each other. They're all making tense aspects. So I think this could be a really pivotal new moon in terms of how we're engaging with all facets of those themes.
Right. Because we know new moon is the sun and the moon are in Libra at the same degree. And that degree is going to also be making an opposition to Mars in Aries, and will be squaring, we could say, the entire Capricorn stellium of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's intense.
So it's almost like this, it's like a crossroads or something, decisions being made.
And you and I had talked about leaning more into that kind of missing leg amidst this very intense T-square energy, which is the Cancer energy, which isn't really present right now.
Right. Which I also think for me is the invitation of the moon, of like coming back home, like being in self-care, connecting to mom or family,
yes,
the home space. So that is a great way to navigate the energy. And just for me in my own personal life, when I see new moon, I'm like, this is not a time to be engaging out in the world. I'm like coming back into myself and recalibrating. Doesn't mean that the whole world is, but that's part of like
your ritual,
like a ritual that we can find ourselves in. And when I think of that Cancer as the missing leg of this cardinal cross, I mean, Cancer is connecting us to these sort of rituals at home.
I guess I can't really overstate the importance of this Mars transit. Not only the fact that Mars has been in Aries for 3 months now and has 3 months to go. Also, Mars doesn't go retrograde, as frequently as some of the other planets. And so Mars being retrograde in Aries is this is a special opportunity in terms of encouraging having that kind of outward motion turning inward.
Yeah.
And then I think if we're speaking to how that speaks to our needs in terms of that Cancerian element as well, it can be maybe even a really revelatory time in terms of understanding something about ourselves that we didn't understand before. But I think, the squares speak to action. So I do think, we might even be, as a society, being asked to be called to action or do things that, we didn't even know we could do, or didn't think we would have to do, or didn't know we had the strength to endure, or, and I feel like there's something energizing and a momentum building up all throughout October in terms of that, with all of these cardinal energies squaring each other like this.
Yes. And then there's this shift here right after the Libra new moon, which this could be a good time for us to listen to Like a Dream. Venus opposition Neptune. Venus in Virgo opposition Neptune in Pisces. So is it cool if we listen to Like a Dream?
Sure.
Why don't we listen to that? And then we're coming to the close here, because we've got this Venus opposition Neptune and then Venus trine Pluto, which there's so many different versions here. There's a lot of different remixes. Is there...
you can play the original, the DJ Romain mix.
Cool.
everything I want or need. I don't wanna be free. Like a dream, I'm floating into ecstasy. You're everything I want or need. I don't wanna be free. Like a dream, I'm floating into ecstasy. You're everything I want or need. I don't wanna be free.
Yes. So
I was 18 years old when I recorded that, by the way, and
wow.
I had laryngitis.
Flashback. Venus and Virgo connecting us to health. So it's interesting, the laryngitis here. I'm actually like interesting you said, because I'm kind of like sensing, I mean, this could be a time where we might be more susceptible to psychic debris that affects our health. Venus and Virgo as being this health placement, and then opposition Neptune and Pisces is just like kind of things, fear or like things, collective emotion kind of floating around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So definitely tend to the help at this time of Libra season. What?
And it feels like it's almost, mirroring or mimicking some of that earlier energy we faced when everything kind of first took off during the Virgo full moon in Pisces season, which was also, the moon was not just opposite the sun, but Neptune as well. So we've come in contact with that again. We did it again with the Pisces full moon in Virgo season that we just had. And now we're having this Venus in Virgo opposing Neptune in Pisces. And again, Neptune can be viewed as the higher octave of Venus. So it's just, it keeps coming up we've seen this all throughout the year of these kind of transits and these astrological themes that keep playing out. But this is another one that's maybe a little bit more overlooked, of the Virgo Pisces polarity that keeps reappearing,
Right.
And happens to keep emerging during a specific heightened sensitivity around the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Neptune and Pisces we've had for some time. So Neptune entered Pisces in 2011. And we're going to look back at this time period and really be like, wow, that was a very Neptune and Pisces time period, because Neptune is at home in the sign of Pisces.
Right.
And that was when I had my quote unquote spiritual awakening, was in 2011, was right when Neptune entered Pisces. So there is a lot of spirituality at this time, but also the shadow of Neptune and Pisces is, I think of it as like a lot of fear and paranoia and being lost and not sure, like, what is this reality that we're in, Neptune and Pisces? And so that opposition of Venus and Virgo, she's like, Venus and Virgo is almost feeling like, it's okay, you don't actually have to know what's going on.
Right. That's a good way of thinking about it.
Take care of today. Make the to-do list of today. And so which feels like a reoccurring theme for a lot of us this year anyway, is kind of being in this Neptunian fog. And because what I think is particular about 2020 in regards to Neptune and Pisces is this is the first year where Neptune transitioned into the third decan and transitioned into the 20s.
Right.
So that was right when COVID-19 began flooding through our collective consciousness.
Yeah. And also not just, I'm thinking too about all the crazy Neptune transits. So we had that Virgo full moon earlier in the year that opposed Neptune, but then we had Mercury was in Pisces for like so long. That transit almost
because of the retrograde. So we're also in Mercury retrograde during this time period too.
Right. And then it ended up being conjunct Neptune on its way out of that transit. So it was like, it's been a the Neptunian fog is a good way to put it, of that disillusionment and that confusion. And that certainly it can be a fear and anxiety. Both Virgo and Neptune deal with that kind of anxiety laden and potentially neurotic energy, in kind of its most lower vibrational form. And it's interesting, you two talking about having a spiritual awakening during this Neptune transit, because, Neptune can also speak to spiritual bypass, if we're not, really doing the work of peering beyond that shadow and that veil and that fog.
Really, really important point, because there's a lot of that going on. And I even also feel the Sag South Node as like pulling people into, well, we're all one, South Node and Sag. My religion is interconnectedness, but then Gemini North Node is saying, no, go towards duality and having conversation around it. And so it's on this axis of like the nodes of fate are the mutable signs, and then this Venus and Virgo, Neptune and Pisces. So there's also almost like this other kind of cross.
Oh, so we get a grand cross there as well.
Yeah. So another crossroads here. Crossroads is like one of our keywords for part 3. We have crossroads, taking action, but also pausing to take care of the self and take a deep breath before taking action, but also being okay being in the fog.
So that the unconscious can become more accessible. And when that happens, we have less fear and superstition and spiritual bypass, right? That's channeling the higher octave of what Neptune can provide, which is really the ultimate enlightenment. It's the last sign in the zodiac. It's going to be really interesting going from Neptune in the 29th degree when we make that transition from there into Aries in a couple of years from now.
I'm just picturing us all holding on to each other and like jumping into the portal of a whole nother dimension.
Yeah. That is accurate.
So we're here. its deep karmic release is Pisces. And so Neptune could be disillusionment around the deep karmic release, but also a window into the higher octave of universal compassion. And so Neptune in Pisces is us like feeling everyone's feeling. And then Venus in Virgo is like, okay, well, let's do something practical around that. Let's volunteer. Let's bring this into like the body or to health. This is all building us up into the end of Libra season, which is going to be Venus in Virgo trine Jupiter in Capricorn on Monday, October 19th, and then Venus in Virgo trine Pluto in Capricorn on the last day of Libra season.
I really love Venus Jupiter aspects. Even the hard aspects tend to not be too crazy. In the natal chart, sometimes with the hard aspects, particularly the square, we can see maybe a more inclination toward hedonistic behavior. Even in the relationship charts, sometimes we can have like an excess of fun. I guess they say too much of a good thing, that kind of energy. But the trine is nice. And the trine encourages, I think, a easygoing or of kind of an organic, natural expansion of our values, our love nature, our desires, how we engage in relationship, in a way that feels very nurturing, and it feels like we can kind of grow or expand in a way that doesn't feel as extreme or jolting, especially when it's an earth trine, and in signs like Virgo and Capricorn, it's kind of this expanding and growth around our values and our views in ways that still feel practical or lean itself toward the practicality of our society and what's going to be beneficial for our world. So I think that's a nice placement.
Yeah. Beneficial for our world. I think this is like so important too with that Capricorn energy. I mean, reflecting back on 2020 as a Jupiter and Capricorn year, it does feel like a year where a lot of us have grown up. Jupiter and Capricorn, we're expanding into our most adult-like self, our most public-oriented self, our most responsible, which is really interesting to have that with the Saturn and Pluto energy that's happening right now. But I even see it in my niece, who's 6 years old. I'm like, wow, she's grown up this year.
Oh, that's an important time to be 6, because that's kind of where, your like egoic consciousness starts to really form.
And it's also your Jupiter opposition, right? Because like we have our Jupiter return around 12. So I know in her chart, she has Jupiter in Cancer, I believe.
Yeah, so it's also right around that time is where you get the first Saturn square too, which is actually what's really, I think it technically happens at 7, but it can happen kind of the end of 6 for some people,
right?
Which is speaking to that first real contact with what it means to be a mature person, or to have a sense of responsibility.
So I think in our own life, when I look at Venus in Virgo trine Jupiter in Capricorn, I here at the end of Libra season, it's like, wow, you've done a lot of growing up this year. I'm going to buy you something nice to celebrate that, or I'm going to like revel and share in that.
Yeah,
like it does feel like it's going to be a Libra season of crossroads and coming up against these squares. And so this Venus trine Jupiter at the end of Libra season does feel like a really great time to just celebrate yourself, which I think it's important for us to do. Like even like buying yourself a healing session, Venus and Virgo, because you've worked a lot this year. You've gone through this like Capricorn initiation. That's what I would do in my own personal life.
You're such a Virgo moon. I just love how with every transit, it's like, okay, so how can we use this energy in a way that's like practical and beneficial? Like with every transit, it's really beautiful to watch you do this.
Well, I think it's a big part of why people choose to listen to my podcast
Yeah, it's inspiring. It's like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. It's a way of taking the esoteric and making it more tangible, which I think also speaks to a lot of your kind of Piscean stuff, but how you put that into practical and service oriented use with your Virgo moon. It's really nice.
I love offering that to other people. Okay, and so thank you for the reflection. And then we end Libra season with Venus trine Pluto as we're here in this Scorpio cusp. So Venus and Virgo trine Pluto in Capricorn.
Yeah. Well, I find that the opinion I had about Venus Jupiter aspects, where even the hard ones, can not be so bad. I feel similarly on the inverse with Pluto Venus aspects, or any kind of Pluto aspect. Actually, people be like, "Oh, it's a soft aspect," but it's like it's Pluto. Like, is there really a such thing as a soft aspect with Pluto? I think this is one that again really forces us to get in touch with, how we are really restructuring and challenging. It's like challenging our foundations so that we can put better ones in place. Yes. That's what that Pluto and Capricorn energy ultimately is trying to do.
Right.
And with the trine to Venus, especially in something like Virgo, we might feel like we can actually do that maybe in some ways that, again, are more tangible or accessible, that maybe have eluded us this whole year up until this point.
Right.
Because we did have the Venus Pluto trine during Taurus season as well. And I think that lends itself to some of that energy as well. But there's something a little bit more methodical about Virgoan energy that I think can make us feel like, it really has that energy of setting out for a task to be accomplished and really feeling the reward of what it means to accomplish it. Yeah. Whereas once again, that Taurus energy is more slow growth oriented. It's more, all earth signs, I guess, actually deal with the long haul more than the short term. But Taurus, I think, is the most extreme version of that, where Virgo can feel it's that more day to day energy. It has that more sense of like a regimen or a routine that you build that certainly does have long term benefits and effects, but that you see show up in your life every day.
I mean, when we're thinking of Pluto and Capricorn as, for instance, the pandemic, there also feels like an opportunity with Venus and Virgo and this health aspect of a lot of healing taking place at this time. Whereas earlier in the month, it was like Pluto went direct, and we said there could be like a spike in cases, or there could be, vomiting or soul purge energy. And then Venus trine Pluto is like, and now we're healing it.
Right.
So we'll pay attention to that there as it takes us into Scorpio season. So, wow, we did it. I think we did it. Wow. We talked for almost 2 hours, which is awesome. And thank you so much for carving out this time in your life to share with us all of your experience with astrology. I know everyone's going to really look forward to this.
Well, thanks for asking me and for caring what I think, and for caring so much that you wanted to share it with your listeners and subscribers. It's really cool.
Well, I love your offering, your astrology offering that you put out in the world. And so I'll be linking that up in the show notes. So if you want to follow Akenya Double Venus on Instagram, you can. You release videos sometimes talking about current transits, and that's how we met, was through Instagram. So Instagram bringing people together. And do you have any sort of offerings or things coming up that people could be looking forward to?
Yeah, I will continue to post on Instagram, and I will, you can always email me if you want a personal reading, I'm in the process of trying to launch a website around that as well. So it's Double Venus Astro on Instagram and on Facebook. And my email is doublevenusastro@gmail.com. So, let me know if I can help you out in any way. I'm more than happy to, use astrology as a tool.
And this seems like a great time of year, Libra season, to be kind of doing that one-on-one work. So if you're interested, again, I'll put links in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cosmic Cousins, for tuning into the show. Happy Libra season to you all. I'll see you next time for the Aries full moon, which is October 1st. And we have a really special guest going to be with us on the show. But I'll let you wait to find out who. So I'll see you in about a week and a half for the Aries full moon episode. In the meantime, again, my name is Jeff Hinshaw. I offer deep dive astrology and tarot readings. You can find out that information at 𝑐osmicCousins.com. You can become a Patreon supporter of the show. And also, as always, rate, review, leave some comments and love. And I'll see you next time. Take sweet care, cousins. And remember, deep breaths.